My name is Sian. I work for Friends of the Earth running educational activities. I'm really delighted to welcome you to this webinar and thank you so much for joining. It's really, really great to be able to connect online, and it's brilliant to see so many of you. There's 40 now, and I'm sure that number will continue to rise in the next few minutes. And yeah, I just want to acknowledge as well that these are really, really difficult times for so many people. And I know that some of you indeed might be going through tough times and have, we're all self-isolating or in quarantine and have been possibly personally affected by this virus. So I just want to acknowledge that. So the agenda for tonight, we have three panelists who I'm delighted to welcome. Aideen O'Doherty from Not Here, Not Anywhere, Fidelma O'Kane from Save Our Sperrins, and Esteban from EcoLeaks and Mendoza Against Fracking. We're going to hear from Aideen first, then Fidelma, and then Not Here, Not Anywhere are going to present a short social media solidarity action, and we're going to have a short break. And then Esteban will present, and we're going to wrap up by 8:30, possibly shortly after 8:30, but if you need to, we'll do our best to stick to time. And if you need to leave at 8:30, by all means do. I also want to introduce Trina and Brian, Trina from Friends of the Earth, Brian from Not Here, Not Anywhere, who are helping out with tech and chat support. So if you need, they can answer any queries if you're having any issues in the chat box. So just to introduce a little bit this event, it's part of a seminar series that Friends of the Earth are running called System Change for a Just Transition. And the purpose is to make some links in around issues of justice and inequity between the global north and south, especially given that Friends of the Earth as a network is actually mostly based in the majority world. And the purpose of these seminars is to explore the root causes of local and global injustices and inequalities or inequities using development education, so participatory and creative methodologies to change awareness levels and attitudes and skills. But obviously we've had to change that a little bit as we pretty rapidly had to move a lot of our activities online, but we're doing our best to stick with that ethos and those values. And so the seminars are making connections between seemingly like disparate issues like food, finance, extractivism, and democracy. So we had 2 in-person seminars already on international solidarity and on justice and climate finance. We've already had 1 webinar, which was on energy democracy. And then after this one, on May 5th, we'll be holding one on justice in the food system. And on May 20th, one on the connections between colonialism, gender oppression, and climate change. So if you sign up to, or if you aren't already, if you sign up to our mailing list and our social media, you'll get a notification about those events. So I just want to share some ideas and reflections before we hear from each of the speakers, just to kind of try to situate the topic in a broader picture and talk a little bit about the concept or dynamic of extractivism, as opposed to just thinking about extractive industries. So extractivism as a dynamic, yes, it's about the exploitation of common natural goods, including not just limited to fossil fuels or minerals, but also including industrial agriculture. But with a difference to just extractive industries is that these resources or common goods are exported with very little added value. So exported in their unrefined or raw state, where a lot of the wealth is remaining in the countries where the products are being refined. So this is often the dynamic, is the wealth is extracted, the resources are extracted from the global south, refined and added value in the global north and distributed, and the profits, the wealth, economic wealth remains here. Whereas the countries the global south countries have been left with a lot of the environmental damage. So a lot of global south economies can be really heavily reliant on income from extractivism, with all the boom and bust cycles that comes with due to changes in the global markets. And those affected are often, like, both on a global scale, in both global north and south, actually, the people who are most affected by both the economic and environmental and indeed social impacts of extractivism are from like excluded communities such as rural, working class, indigenous, and communities of color. So that isn't really unique. Like, while this dynamic of extractivism does play out more with this global north, global south dynamic, these extractive projects do also take place in the global north. And we're going to talk about that today, about some examples from Ireland. And the people who are more directly affected by those projects often also come from more excluded communities. So just to try to situate a little bit, kind of the rapidly try to situate some of the complexity of it. So I couldn't not talk a little bit about the links between COVID-19, extractivism, and climate change. And all of the information on this slide comes from a webinar that I joined today from a group called the People's Dialogue, which is a network of organizations all based in the global south between Africa and Latin America. So it was a South-South dialogue that I had the privilege to listen in to. And what I learned, and some of this would be evident already, that extractive industry workers, of course, are already vulnerable because of health issues to do with the work that they do, such as respiratory issues, that they're working in dangerous conditions, but as a result, of course, are more vulnerable to the virus. And then a lot of them are also transient workers, so they're being moved between different areas, and that is affecting local communities near these extractive industries as well. And then in a number of countries, mining and extraction continues. Workers have to continue to work because they've been denominated essential industries. And that's the case in Ecuador, Chile, Colombia, and Brazil, and I'm sure other countries as well. So therefore, yeah, all of these workers are still working, even though other workers are under lockdown. Then communities that are already affected by extractive industries, such as issues around lack of access to water or not having clean water, obviously are then going to be more impacted by the virus, as they don't have enough water to wash their hands, for example, or have maybe lost access to subsistence agriculture because of mining contamination. And therefore they need to work in the informal economy on a daily basis to afford their basic needs, but under lockdown, they can't do that. And actually a group that I'm involved with called Stop Blood Coal Ireland, that works in solidarity with communities in Northern Colombia, who are dealing with the impacts of Latin America's largest open cast coal mine. We are at the moment like crowdfunding to send basically emergency relief to communities that they're facing serious malnutrition because they can't access enough food because they can't work. And then I'm sure a lot of you know of the concept of the shock doctrine, whereby crises are used to push through like neoliberal reforms. So at the moment, extractive permits are being issued, environmental regulations are being relaxed. This is happening globally. Some of it has gotten some headlines in the United States, for example. Then extractive companies are also using the pandemic to whitewash themselves and make themselves appear to be a healthy or a safe industry in donating to hospitals. And I know that that's also happening on the island of Ireland. And lastly, then, as mineral and fossil fuel market prices are dropping and companies' share prices are falling, I initially thought, oh, well, maybe that means that some of the production will stop. But one of the compañeros on this webinar today was saying that companies do not want to lose their market share. They don't want to stop selling, even if it's at a lower price. So they will seek to make up for those losses by actually cutting their costs and wages and safety. So I know that's a little bit bleak, but just to set the scene a little bit and the links between COVID-19 and extractivism. So the purpose of this evening is to hear from groups both in Ireland, north and south, and abroad, in this case Argentina, on their work in challenging extractive projects and the lessons that they've learned and that they can share with us. and also to learn and think about how we can show solidarity locally and internationally, including the social media action that we're going to do halfway through. And just before I wrap up this quick intro, I just want to do a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. So I want to point you to the Q&A feature. So this, you can use this during the course of the webinar. This is the place to ask the panelists any questions that you have, and we'll keep the chat more for just general comments or if you're having any tech issues. We're going to take some questions for panelists directly after each presentation. We might not be able to get to all of the questions due to lack of time, but the Q&A feature, it allows for you to upvote other people's questions. So if you see a question that you're also interested to hear the answer, like please upvote it. It's like, give it a like. And that way we know that those are the questions that are most important for us to get to. And last thing is that when you leave the webinar, a link should open up directly in your browser to an evaluation form, and we'd really, really appreciate it if you could fill that in, please. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Aideen.
Hello everyone, I am Aideen O'Doherty from Not Here, Not Anywhere, and I'm going to give you a short presentation about the work Not Here, Not Anywhere does, particularly on liquefied natural gas, which would be fracked gas imported into Ireland in proposed LNG terminals here. I'm going to explain a bit about that, and then I'm also going to be coming back to you later to do a solidarity action at the tea break. So I'm going to share my screen and go through a few slides. Okay, so hopefully you can all do that, or you can all see that, sorry. And yeah, and also while I'm setting this up, to say thank you to Sian for inviting us to co-host and for doing so much work organizing this. And it's great to be here with Esteban and Fidelma as well. And it's great to see all of you here as well. Okay, so I'm going to start off. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about Not Here, Not Anywhere, and specifically the work we do on liquefied natural gas through, and also with this lens of global solidarity, because that's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about the global kind of fracking cycle and the people impacted by fossil fuel and mining extractivist projects. So Not Here, Not Anywhere is a volunteer environmental activist group. We are, we're non-partisan, not affiliated with any political party or any NGO. We're just a group of volunteers. We meet every week, and I'll give you details at the end about how you can join if you want. So we campaign on two issues. So our tagline, you can see on the big red banner there, is for a fossil-free future. So we campaign on an end to offshore drilling for oil and gas off the Irish coast, which is still going on. And we also campaign against new fossil fuel infrastructure. And particularly, we've done a lot of work on the proposed liquefied natural gas terminals in the Shannon Estuary in County Kerry and in Cork Harbour. So that's the aspect of our work that I'm going to talk about tonight, is LNG, and particularly we're going to look in a bit more detail at Shannon LNG. So what is liquefied natural gas? I think this is actually a very handy graphic from an industry website, so you know, we might as well use them. So liquefied natural gas is gas that is extracted in one country, and it can be extracted by conventional means or by unconventional, say by fracking. So that's the exploration part. It's extracted, then it is frozen, and when it's frozen, it liquefies. So there are these liquefaction facilities to liquefy the gas, and then big export terminals are built, and the gas is put in big containers on ships and shipped to somewhere like Ireland, where an import terminal, and it's regasified there, and it's put into the system. So the proposal in Ireland is to build import terminals. And why is liquefied natural gas such a bad thing? People don't always think of gas as, a lot of talk you'd hear from the industry is how gas is a transition fuel and gas is a clean fossil fuel. But liquefied natural gas, the way it's transported, the amount of methane that leaks throughout the process of producing it and transporting it and burning it, it's actually 44% more damaging to the climate than coal. So I think I was going to show you this really short video from a great European group called Gastivists, and this will explain why we cannot afford to build any liquefied natural gas terminals and why more gas is a bad idea in general. Okay, so gas is essentially the next big fight in terms of fossil fuels. So we've had like oil prices we know are tanking at the moment. Coal is on its way out, but gas, we're still very much planning to rely on it here in Ireland and in Europe for the next 30 years, and we really cannot afford to do that if we want to save climate in the future. So yes, LNG, a proposed LNG in Ireland. So the map on the right, you'll see that's fossil fuel projects in Ireland, current and potential projects, and the little grey ship there, that represents potential LNG terminals. And we have two, like I said, in North Kerry and then in Cork Harbour right in the city. So that's the greenfield site in Kerry where Shannon LNG is proposed, and that's obviously Cork Harbour. So Shannon LNG in Kerry would be a fixed terminal on land, and the Cork Harbour one would be a floating terminal. And I'm going to show you this is a very short video this time. This explains a little bit more about Shannon LNG. Yeah, so obviously you saw there, that video was made last year and it said in March 2019 construction will start. Luckily, construction did not start on Shannon LNG. So I wanted to show you this to give you an idea of just how long the campaign has been going on against this terminal, different groups that were involved and different tactics that have been used to delay it so that there is no construction. It's currently tied up in the European courts, and hopefully there will never be any construction on it. But yeah, the project was announced years ago in 2006, and planning permission was granted in 2008. And they had, I think they had local investors then. I think they had it was a company called Shannon LNG. But then it was bought by a company called New Fortress Energy in the US. And then I suppose a big boost for Shannon LNG came in 2013 when it was added to the projects of common interest list in the EU. So this entitled it to a few $100 million of priority funding from the EU. So this has been a big issue in the campaign, because it means that national politicians are able to say, well, the EU has approved this. And actually people, when we went down to Kerry to talk about Shannon LNG there and to listen, local people were saying, well, look, the EU have approved this project. They're willing to give all this money to it. How can it be wrong? But it is wrong. It's a terrible idea. And we'll talk more about the EU shortly and their role in that. A couple of years ago, planning permission was extended. And I suppose after that, that's when I think the protests really started to gain more pace. So specific Stop Shannon LNG protests, we had several of them last year. I think there were probably 6 or 7 protests last year about Shannon LNG, and it became taken up as a really big issue, and loads of groups, I'm going to list the groups at the end who are working on it, but loads of groups. Safety Before LNG was the main opposition to the project from the very beginning. Johnny has done so much work on it, and since then loads of other groups have come in. There's a real movement to stop Shannon LNG. The legal cases are another tactic that have been incredibly important, and they have been led by Friends of the Irish Environment, who you should look up. They're an organisation based in Cork. And first they had a legal case to do with planning permission. That went through the Irish courts, and it's been referred to the European courts. So that's stopping construction from happening, basically. So that's hugely important. And there's been a lot of debate around the PCI list, trying to get Shannon LNG off the PCI list, but unfortunately it was renewed. Approval for that was renewed earlier this year. But Friends of the Irish Environment have taken another legal case to do with the PCI list, and they're currently raising funds for that legal case. And I'm going to tell you at the end, we're hopefully going to have a fundraiser soon. So I'll give you details of that at the end. So that's kind of a Shannon LNG timeline and some of the tactics that have been used in this really long-running campaign. So to explain in more detail about international solidarity and why Shannon LNG isn't just a bad idea for Ireland and locking us into fossil gas for years, it also has these devastating impacts on communities, on people at the other end of the supply chain. So you'll see in the map of America there, actually I meant to put little circles on it, you can see all the shale basins, or the best places to dig up fracked gas in the US, essentially. And up there, I don't know if you can see my mouse when I do this, but you see the blue Marcellus. That's where the Marcellus shale in the Appalachian Basin, that's where the gas from Shannon LNG would be fracked in the Appalachian Basin to come to Shannon LNG. And down here in Texas, the Permian Basin is where the gas would come for Cork LNG. And we're an important link in this fracking cycle, because Shannon LNG is one of several liquefied natural gas projects in Europe. And Jean-Claude Juncker and Donald Trump signed a deal, I think it was summer 2018, I think. They signed a deal where Europe sort of agreed to up its consumption, or to purchase all this US fracked gas. And to do that, so the European Commission is supporting lots of liquefied natural gas terminals around Europe, including Shannon. So it's a really toxic chain that people want to make us part of. So quite briefly, Shannon LNG, just to talk a little bit about the communities on the other side in Pennsylvania. There's a fracking site in the Appalachian Basin in Pennsylvania. This, I think, is a tweet that encapsulates it a little bit from Philadelphia Physicians for Social Responsibility. So we'll keep fighting the industry in Pennsylvania, but with every purchase, we experience more cancer, more radiation, more asthma, and more health issues for a variety of people, particularly vulnerable people. So, I mean, in Ireland, many people will know that we banned fracking because it has these terrible health impacts as well as impacts on the natural environment. But the government and the EU seems to be okay with importing gas that's fracked, as long as the fracking isn't happening in our backyard. So it's incredibly hypocritical. And Cork LNG, so the floating terminal plant for Cork Harbour, this is also a US company involved called Next Decade. It's not as advanced as Shannon LNG in that there's no planning permission or anything. There's only or planning application. There's only a memorandum of understanding. This is where the gas would come from, the Permian Basin in Texas. So in the bottom right picture, you'll see the lady holding the sign is Becca from Sierra Club, and Save RGV from LNG, the activist group over there. And she said the Permian Basin is just a wasteland, and if you take shots of it at night, it's all flares. It's a really horrible, and like the industry might try to claim that not all gas is fracked, and technically 67% of gas coming from the US is fracked, but she said it's all fracking over there, and any new gas is going to be fracked. And that's a picture of Save RGV from LNG on the top there, talking about RGV Cork. So those are some of the solidarity links that we have with them, with groups over there. So almost finally, what do we want? So a couple of things, sorry, not what do we want, I specifically put what do we need there, because this is what we need to stop these LNG terminals from coming and stop locking us into fracked gas and devastating communities elsewhere in the world for another 30 to 50 years. So we need a global fracking ban. Fracking has been banned in lots of places beyond Ireland, particularly several European countries. We need a global fracking ban, and that's something that the UN should have on its plate. And to really stop Shannon LNG, we need to ban new fossil fuel infrastructure. So what we really need is a moratorium on new fossil fuel infrastructure, because they would need to cover installations which have been given planning permission already, which will be Shannon LNG. So that's what Not Here, Not Anywhere is fighting for in terms of liquefied natural gas, and also to ban the importation of fracked gas, but that's probably trickier in technical terms to separate out molecules of gas coming through pipelines into the country than it is to just ban new infrastructure. So that's really what we need to be doing. That's what the science tells us that we need to be doing, and that's what communities who are on the other end of this toxic supply chain are telling us what we need to be doing too. So get involved. There are 2 slides to get involved. So slide 1 relates to all the different groups around the country who are opposing LNG. And you can see a list of groups on the left. And actually, as soon as I finish the presentation, I'm going to put a link to these slides in the Zoom chat, and we can post them in the Facebook event as well. So yeah, all the different groups on the left, and you'll also see that map of local climate groups. I have a link to the Google Map version of it there, and that will help you find a group in your area that you can just go along and join anytime, or find out more if you want to find out more information. So get involved part 2, which is Not Here, Not Anywhere specific. You can, 2 petitions you can sign, 2 actions you can take. You can email your TD about the Shannon LNG project, and you can email the Port of Cork, which is the Irish company regarding Cork LNG. You can demand that they stop Cork LNG, and you can come to the Not Here Not Anywhere weekly meetings. They're probably more accessible now because we don't have to go up all the flights of stairs that we usually did. We're having our meetings over Zoom every Monday, 6 to 8 p.m. So you'll find the link on our Facebook page. And finally, upcoming events. We're going to have a Shannon LNG fundraiser, hopefully on the Maybank holiday weekend, and a public participation workshop on 27th of May, because that was one of the techniques that has worked effectively with Shannon LNG is participating in planning consultations, sending in your submission, having your say, and making your voice heard with the people who make the decisions. So we're going to be having a workshop on that on the 27th of May, and keep an eye on our social media for details. So yeah, that is me, and I'm going to, will I keep sharing my screen, Sian, or do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
Stop it for a minute, because I think it's nice for people to be able to see us all for a second. Yeah. That was brilliant. Thanks a million, Aideen. And there's been a few questions that have been addressed already in the chat and the Q&A. So I think maybe we'll just move on, and then if any questions come up during the rest of the webinar that you can address at the end, we can do that.
Sure.
Great. Okay, so without further ado, I'm really pleased to welcome Fidelma O'Kane to present, and I'm going to be sharing slides for Fidelma. So I'll just get that set up now, and I'll unmute you, Fidelma. There you go. Okay, just 1 second. Okay, you should be able to see those. Can you see those okay, Fidelma?
Yes, surely. Can you
Perfect.
hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. You're all good to go.
Okay, I'm Fidelma O'Kane, and I'm from a group called Save Our Sperrins up in the Sperrin Mountains that straddle Tyrone and Derry. And our campaign is to protect our water, our air, our land, and our health from the toxic pollution of gold mining. So you can see from the first slide just the beautiful area that we live in, an area of outstanding natural beauty. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah, just 1 sec, sorry. There we go.
Okay, it's just a little background to what has happened here. A Canadian exploration company called Dalradian Gold arrived in Northern Ireland, and they were given a lot of help by the government and government departments. They were granted prospecting licenses by the Department for the Economy for all metals, and they were granted option lease agreements for gold and silver from the Crown Estate over an area of 122,000 hectares in counties Tyrone and Derry. Huge, covers most of the two counties. So they arrived actually, and I feel ashamed to say they actually arrived 10 years ago, because we didn't know they were here up until about 6 years ago. And because they were working under the radar, they were investing, as they call it, in the social license. And that in 2015, they set up a Tyrone Fund, and that's where they give out sponsorship and grants and small amounts of money to groups, organisations, sport clubs, community organisations. And in return, people had to allow themselves to be used in publicity, and they weren't allowed to say or do anything about Dalradian. So it was, as you all know, there's no such thing as a free lunch, but this was what was happening. And they were also getting to know people of influence in the area, politicians, clergy, teachers, community leaders, and getting them on board. So they were working away quietly and very effectively over the years. And as I say, even though it wasn't far from us, we weren't even aware of their existence until we heard about them giving out Christmas hampers to everybody. Okay then, and then in 2017, sorry, just the very last point was just November 2017, they submitted their large planning application, 10,000 pages for a gold mine and a processing plant. It was the largest planning application in the history of Ireland, north or south. Okay, move on. Sian has asked me to talk about the challenges we have faced and the lessons we have learned from this battle. Okay, so the challenges are ongoing, and overcoming the company propaganda has been, you know, it's an ongoing struggle, because they employ 2 PR companies and they have got community liaison officers, and all the time are churning out propaganda about how they have come to save the people, not only in Tyrone and not only in the north, but in all of Ireland, because they're going to have all these highly paid jobs available for the next 20 years if they get planning permission. They still haven't got the planning permission, and that's an important point to remember. Okay, another challenge for us has been learning all about gold mining. We had to read the 10,000 page application, we had to inform ourselves and research it, and then we set out to inform other people. Then the next step was getting people motivated to act, to do something about it, because I suppose traditionally we relied on our politicians and government departments. We thought that they acted on our behalf. These points are not in any particular order. Okay, so understanding the jargon, and that was the whole jargon, not only of the gold mining company, but the jargon of the planning department, of the government departments. And I mean, it took us a while to grasp that really, for example, and this leads in probably into how the systems work, the planning department, really their aim is to help companies, you know, get established here. It's all about inward investment and the economy. That is the most important thing to all the government departments and to the politicians. And it took us a while to learn that. And then how do we get them to understand that the environment is important as well? So a challenge has been to keep positive over the years and to keep going, to keep our energy levels up. And we have been doing that okay. And dealing with the media, because I was mentioning all the companies, the PR companies, and for example, our local media, they, for the last 18 months, they have had full page advertisements every week from Dalradian. So it's part of their income now. So they don't want to hear any stories against them. You know, it's all this good news, how they're going to save us all and provide these highly paid jobs. Our politicians, it's been a challenge in the past. Our area was traditionally one particular party, and we thought they worked for us, but unfortunately we found out when we realised about the gold mining and the damage it was going to do to the water and the air and the land and our health, our politicians told us they shared our concerns, but words is what they told us, no actions. They did nothing to help us. And then money, okay, a challenge for us was getting enough money to sort of, you know, print leaflets and have meetings and things like that, but it wasn't a major problem. But it was more the money that the company has and that they're seeking to get more, because really gold mining isn't about a need for gold, it's about a greed for profit and a greed for money and a greed for you know, that's just really what it's about, greed. Okay. Now the strategies, these are in no particular order, and I have pictures then to illustrate all of them. So after this one, I'll not be doing as much talking. Okay, as I say, we informed ourselves and we devised leaflets with information to let people know, and we put up posters in our local area so people would know, anyone passing by would know there's a problem here. You know, with no gold mining, no cyanide, no arsenic, no, you know, health is more important than wealth, those sort of posters. We held public information meetings. We've had a huge amount of them throughout Tyrone and Fermanagh, and not only that, but through the 6 counties, and we've had some in the 26 counties as well. Networking ties in with that, because that's how we met other people and other groups, and nationally and internationally we have you know, worked at making links with groups, and it has been very successful because we get strength from each other. Letter writing, well, we've been writing to all the government departments and to politicians, and we've been writing objections against the planning application. We've been lobbying people as well, and that is an ongoing job. Social media has been very successful with us. Save Our Sperrins, we have a Facebook page and we have almost 7,000 followers. So that is, for a little rural area, you know, we have grown immensely through social media, and all the groups that have been set up in Tyrone and Derry, there's about 12 of us, 12 different groups now, and we share information, which is very good, you know, very helpful and strengthens us. We have lots of pickets and protests. Anywhere that we think needs a picket or a protest, we go, and we have lots of WhatsApp groups and messenger groups that we can call at short notice to come out. And we decided, because Dalradians sponsor a lot of prize giving and awards and things, we thought wherever they go, we'll go. So that's what we have been doing, following them about. And 2 years ago in March, we sent 2 delegates over to Toronto to this big mining conference. It's called Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, but it's a global conference with 20 to 25,000 people at it. And because we wanted to find out what was happening there, how did a Canadian company know to come to Tyrone? And you'll see from the photos, and I'll tell you what we learned. We've had a lot of events, well, not a lot, a number of events, and mostly related to celebrations. And the one that stands out for me would be when we had the Native American Indians who came from Standing Rock, the campaign against the oil pipeline being put through their territory, and they came over to visit. And we had a lovely day of celebration, or a couple of days. We got a bit bold, and we have taken a few bits of direct action, and the photos, I'll explain that when we come on. And then, as I was saying, the politicians weren't helping us. Okay, the strategies, you've gone backwards.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so I'm down at the council election. I was saying that our politicians weren't supporting us, so we decided we needed to have someone to represent ourselves. So back in the May elections for our local council, we stood an independent anti-gold mining candidate on that single ticket, and he was the first councillor elected in Mid-Tyrone. So we were absolutely delighted, because the parties that normally would be in hadn't given us any chance of success. And it was amazing how when people work together, what they achieved. And finally, judicial reviews. We've had one successful one, and there's another one ongoing at the moment, and I imagine we'll have lots more in the future. Okay?
Okay.
Now we can go through these quickly. That's just some of the leaflets that we produced over the last 5 years. Keep going. And that's an example of a meeting in a community hall, and where we're giving out information and give out leaflets. And that is one of the areas, park, that developed a group themselves, Park Against the Ruination of the Countryside. But there's loads of them. There's Draperstown, Love's Green, there's Dungiven, Dam, there's Oma, Cameo. So all the local towns and villages in Tyrone and Derry have now got their own little group. Okay, move on. That was one of our first protests, and that was actually in November 2016, where Dalradian were having a consultation, but they had no information for us. So we had just a protest at their site. Next slide, please. Now that's a more recent one. That was at the local council offices back in, I think it was September, October time. The local council planning department grants permission to make boreholes to the company, and they've made hundreds of boreholes in our area, and the council planners haven't considered the environmental impact or the cumulative impact, and we felt they weren't listening to the people, so we picketed the council meeting. Okay, the next slide. There's some more of our protests, and we do try to have fun at times. For example, getting dressed up. A group in Derry, an art group, made us the costumes, and we thought we were the Beatles there. And then up in the top left, that was a sit-down protest, and the company called the police. They've now started to call the police whenever we have protests. But generally, as the police point out, we're not breaking the law, so it's not been a major issue. Continue on. Then the direct action, I was saying, okay, I'll speak about the one on the right. First of all, this is one of our protectors or defenders, and he dressed up in the garments, the protective equipment that Dalradian employees wear, like a high-vis jacket and a hard hat and steel toe cap boots. And he went on the site, and I think Dalradian thought that he was one of their workers, and he had no problem gaining access, and he chained himself to the drill rig, and he stood there for 8 hours. And we all gathered on the roadside to cheer him on and play music and call to him. and get photographers along and stuff. And the police were called, and the police thought he was one of Dalradian's staff, and they couldn't see us doing anything wrong. And then it's just halted their work for a day, and it cost them money. And then on the top left corner, the people in the high vis are Dalradian employees, and the people at the back are local men who went into the field when they saw the Dalradian employees pegging out a site. So they just hung around, and Dalradian employees didn't continue with their work. So another day was wasted doing that. Okay? Wasted for them, not for us. We can't take credit for the Greencastle People's Office, but this caravan appeared on the site, and we were told that it was to be for the use of the people of the area, for a focal point where we can meet and give out information. And it has now grown to 3 caravans, and we use it as a focal point for the community, for celebrations, and meet. You know, it's really good because it's actually on their site, on their land. And even though we've been threatened with eviction and enforcement notice, nothing has happened yet because nobody owns the caravans, so they can't get an owner for it. Okay. On to the next slide. More networking, and the top left is a group in Peru, and then we have Cavan and Monaghan down at the Doyle. As pollution knows no borders, neither does nature. And the bottom right, Donegal. In the middle, Latin America Solidarity Centre in Dublin, and the top right is Connemara. So that's only an example of some of the places in Ireland we've networked with and groups, okay? And then I was mentioning about the Native American Indian who came, Chas Jewett, and this is her in the tractor up at the GPO. She came, and it was really, she told us her story and the campaign they've had trying to prevent the pipeline going through their territory. And it was really humbling to hear what they've had to endure. Okay, the next slide, please. Next slide. And that was the celebrations the day Chas was there. They continued into the night with a bonfire, and some great musicians, Colm Sands in the top right and Conor O'Kane on the bottom right. Continue on. Next slide. And then these are our 2 intrepid prospectors who went to Toronto for us in March 2018, Emmett and Sinead. The top left is them dressed up at the conference. Don't they look the part? They said they were the only young ones. All the other miners and prospectors were older people. On the right, that's them on the plane going across wearing suitable t-shirts, Love Tyrone, Say No to Mining, and I Stand with Standing Rock. And then the bottom picture is them with a group they met in Toronto, Mining and Justice Network Canada. And they were really helpful to them, introduced them to, put them in touch with different media outlets so that the pair were able to do interviews, and spent a very successful few days over in Toronto, and brought us back a lot of information. For example, that the Irish government is over there every year in March selling Ireland off to mining companies. They have a stand that says Ireland is open for business, and they encourage people to come to the island. There's no border, which is a great thing, surely, if they would only be like that all the time. And they say there's tax concessions, relaxed environmental legislation. Come here. And just for people in the south might know, there's already 521 prospecting licenses given out in the 26 counties, and there's 13 given out in the northern 6 counties. Okay, continue on. And then I mentioned about our successful anti-gold mining councillor, independent, and I saw his name coming up there earlier, so he's listening in. Hello, Emmett. And it was great. That was the day of the election in May, and you can see all the children were so ecstatic about his election, as well as the adults. And I think I've only a few more. And that was a judicial review victory on November 2019. And that was, I took it myself and initiated it in December 2017. Northern Ireland Environment Agency had granted a discharge consent to the gold mining company to discharge 9 heavy metals into our local river, which is a special area of conservation. a special area of conservation because of the presence of freshwater pearl mussels, salmon and otters. And the 9 heavy metals were arsenic, mercury, lead, cadmium, copper, chromium, zinc, etc. Always miss one or two when I'm saying it. So that went on for almost 2 years, and eventually in November, Northern Ireland Environment Agency conceded and Dalradian kept quiet, and we were victorious. So it was a small victory in the bigger scheme of things, but at least we learned a lot. And then our other strategy, which has been a very big one, has been getting objections into the planning application. And 2 days ago, I checked the planning portal and there was 34,686 objections on already lodged. It's still open for objections. We have sample objections on Save Our Sperrins Facebook page, and you can email them in. And the important thing to remember is anyone, anywhere in the world of any age can send in an objection. So let's hope that all the people who are joined in tonight will send their objection in and get family, friends and neighbours and colleagues and all to send in objections. Okay, we'll continue on.
Yeah, sorry.
And lessons learned. Okay, democracy demands eternal vigilance. I'm not sure if it was Jefferson said that, but we have learned that we have to keep our eyes and ears open. And if we don't if ordinary people don't take action, you needn't depend on politicians and government departments. The system is corrupted, and I suppose it was, well, we got to realise it when we got files of stuff for the judicial review, but also in the north here through the RHI inquiry, and in the south when we saw that the minister that was over telling people, mining companies, that Ireland is open for business is the same minister that's granting the prospecting licences. So the system north and south is corrupted. People power, we have learned that people coming together to work together is really wonderful. And it reminded me of a saying that's very common in our part of the country here, Ní neart go curla héile. Cooperation is our strength, and that is so, so important. We have learned to appreciate and protect nature. And I think, you know, we, as I say, we live in this lovely area, and looking around us, it's so handy, it's so easy to take it for granted. But I think this pandemic, furthermore, as well as the gold mining campaign, the pandemic has made people more aware of the need to appreciate and protect nature. I suppose the networking locally and globally, it made us realise we're all part of the one global campaign, and our campaigns are all interlinked, and ultimately our health is our wealth, and we have to protect our water and our air. That's what we need to live. Another lesson we learned is we have to pace ourselves for the long haul. And I suppose 5 years ago, I definitely thought, I was just retiring, and I thought, I'll have plenty of time now to read books and go on holidays. I didn't think it would be in a gold mining campaign for this length of time, but we are determined, and okay, be another 5, another 15, we will be here to see it through. And I think, believe we can win. I think it's about having a positive mental attitude. You know, if you believe in what you're doing and you believe you're right, and then we can win and we will win. That is our belief. And finally, celebrate any small victory, any small step forward, any blow to the mining company, we celebrate it. Any anniversary of something, an action we took, we celebrate it. And it's great, it gives us strength, it gives us solidarity and encouragement to go on. Those are the lessons learned. I think I might have 1 or 2 more. Just the last slide, actually. I always love this slide here. It's one of our supporters, and he's gone over to the gold mining company on a winter's day with his banner, "No poisonous gold mining in the Sperrins, Dalradian out." And it reminded me of a saying of John F. Kennedy, "One person can make a difference, and everyone should try." And I feel if every one of us try, we will certainly make a difference. So thanks very much for listening. That's me finished.
Great, thank you, Fidelma. That was excellent, and there's lots of really supportive and admiring comments in the chat there. So maybe just briefly, you could answer one of the questions that somebody has put forward. Do you think we should be boycotting gold and other mined minerals if we can?
Yes, I would feel that, you know, I've read from earthworks that there's enough gold in the bank vaults of the world to last approximately 300 years. And really, the majority of gold is used for jewelry. And it can be recycled and reused. We can't take it with us when we die. So I think it's really important to look at how it's, you know, about being recycled, reused and that. And the use of gold for jewelry. Do we need it? Cosmetic jewelry is handy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay. I know there's a couple of other brief queries, but I think we're going to move on because it's 8 o'clock already. So Aideen is going to present this really short and brief social media action that you can take, and we're just going to have a 5-minute break for you to be able to do that. So I'll hand over to Aideen. You're muted, Aideen.
Yes. Hello again. Yep. So obviously with coronavirus, it's been really hard to take actions because we can't get outside and protest like we want to. So a really good thing to do is take social media actions, and we're going to do one now, which we have called Brewing Up a Twitter Storm. So I am going to share my screen for a second, and I am also going to drop a document in the chat. Hang on one second. Sorry, screen sharing. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. So I'm going to drop this document in the chat. We're going to do an action in relation to shut down KKR, which is, sorry, let me put this in the chat and then I'm going to share it. Okay, so. Okay, so there's a Google Doc in the chat that you can use to help you do this action, but I'm going to share my screen, which will also help. Okay, so we're going to do this shutdown KKR action. So this relates to a fracked gas and liquefied natural gas pipeline in Canada, in British Columbia. So it's going straight through Wet'suwet'en territory, indigenous lands. It's threatening the land, water, air, and the people. And the impact that the water there, I was listening to a Wet'suwet'en chief the other day, and water is everything there. Water provides food. Water is life there. And so this proposed pipeline, which would import frack gas from one side of British Columbia to an LNG export terminal on the other side, the work on this pipeline is still going ahead during COVID-19. And it's even further endangering people there. So we're going to ask KKR, which is a potential investor in this pipeline, not to invest in the project. And we're going to do that if you go to page 2 there. We're going to do that by, if you have Twitter, you can send one of these suggested tweets. So you can copy and paste from a document, go to your Twitter account and send one of these tweets. And this is part of a global action that people everywhere are doing for Earth Day. So you can send one of those tweets, and then you can also, even if you don't have Twitter, you can sign this petition. So that's number 2 there, and then you can share it online, and we have a suggested tweet you can use to share it online. Or you can also, you can share the petition link by WhatsApp, Facebook, even your Instagram bio or your email signature. And you can also follow, we've links there to various groups you can follow to learn more about the Coastal GasLink pipeline and Wet'suwet'en territory. And there are loads of really great groups working on this now, and there's also a donate link there. So this is a really sort of easy way for us to show our solidarity with communities directly affected and even more affected by fossil fuel and extractivism projects, even more affected during coronavirus. And these things can have real impact as well if KKR get lots of tweets like this, especially from all around the world. So yeah, I think we're going to take, Sienna, are we still taking a couple of minutes tea break so people can?
Yeah, so maybe just 2 minutes for people to go get themselves a cup of tea or a glass of water and tweet. And it's 4 minutes past now, so 6 or 7 minutes past we'll start back again. So I'm really happy to welcome now Esteban Servat from EcoLeaks and Mendoza Against Fracking to speak. Esteban, oh, he might be making a cup of tea as well. There you are. I'll just unmute you. Yeah, we can hear you now, and I'm just going to share your slides now. 1 second. Okay. Oh yeah, just to let you all know, you probably realized there's a little bit of a delay between when you tell me to move on from a slide to when it actually appears on your screen. So just so you know. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Cian and everyone. Basically, I will tell you the story of a frontline community in Argentina, where we have been fighting fracking. I'm no longer in Argentina. I am connecting from Germany, where I have been living for the past year or so, since I had to exile from being persecuted for this fight. Next slide, please. So I am sure most of you know about fracking, and I intend to pass through this very quickly, but just in very general terms, it can be said that fracking has come to the world, it has been developed to save the fossil fuel industry from its extinction, and in turn, take us all to extinction, because it's come to expand the life of oil and gas, going much deeper into the ground, into the earth, to find these unconventional reservoirs of shale and tight gas and oil, which in order to extract, it requires great amounts of energy, water, over 600 chemicals, which many of them are extremely dangerous and cancer causing and very damaging to the environment and the health of people and animals. And so in any way you look at fracking, it's just insanity. And it can be said that it has it's insanity in many aspects. One is the local devastation it causes, the environmental destruction at a local level where it's applied, then the global environmental impact, and also something that is very relevant right now, it's the economic, the financial bubble that fracking represents, which I will talk about very soon. Next, please. So I think Aideen already went through the gas process for creating liquefied natural gas. So it's basically compressing it and freezing it to over minus 120 Celsius in order to be able to transport it over the ocean, which is the way it's coming into Europe. So this is why this is important, because Europe is a huge counterpart to the production and extraction of fracked gas and oil in the Americas, in the global south. And it's very important that we stop it. Next, please. So not many people know that everybody knows that fracking is bad for the environment at a local level, but not many people know of the global implications of fracking going on in the world. Some studies have found that fracking is a big player in the increase of methane in global methane emissions. And here you have in this slide, in the picture, you can see from a camera from the organization Earthworks in the US, an infrared camera showing what it's invisible for the normal eye, but with this camera you can see the emissions and loss of methane and many other greenhouse gases on a constant way throughout the production process of fracking. Next, please. This was a groundbreaking study from the US by a leading author on methane, Dr. Howard, which, by the way, will give a webinar very soon. And I will share the details. Cian maybe can share that with everyone. Basically, this study was a game changer because it shows that fracking is responsible for over 50% of all of the world's increased methane emissions from fossil fuels, and over 1/3 when you consider all sources combined over the last decade, which is the decade of fracking going global, going massive. This study only took into account North American fracking, just the US, Canada, and Mexico. But as you know, fracking is also going on in many other places, including in my country, which I will tell you more later. But as you can see, it's a major cause of the accelerating global warming, which the UN, the IPCC have been alerting us on the record levels of methane emissions, but they all fail to mention one of the main culprits. You will not find a word of fracking at the COP. You will not find a word about fracking in the IPCC reports, and this is not casual. There's a lot of power behind this, and I will talk about this soon. Next, please. So as Aideen also mentioned before, shale gas is much worse than coal for the planet. It's 44% worse than coal in its carbon footprint, and yet the media, the governments, and the companies are trying to sell this as a clean option, a clean transition into the future. But it's just taking us back into the past. Next, please. So the legal status of Europe, this map is from briefly before the UK implementing the moratorium, but as you can see, at least in Western Europe, there's heavy restrictions or prohibition throughout all these countries, yet it is the very companies of these countries that cannot frack their own homeland that are fracking Argentina and much of the third world for Europe to consume this cheap gas, get the royalties from all these companies to continue fueling an unsustainable lifestyle, which is if the rest of the world were to follow, there would be not enough. We would need many times the number of Earth that we have now for the resources that this takes. Next, please. So, fracking is taking us, instead of where we need to go, it's just speeding toward the abyss, where we should be going to renewable energies for this energy transition, as it was going to happen when we were going to reach the peak oil moment in history. But fracking, as I was saying, came in the picture to save the fossil fuel industry. It just is expanding the resources available to the fossil fuel industry for decades or hundreds of years as new basins for fracked gas and oil are found all over the world. So Donald Trump, heading all of this, he's putting tariffs on renewable energies to make them even harder to develop, and subsidizing fracking. Like right now, he's about to save them, trying to get billions of dollars of a package to rescue their failing fracking companies. Next, please. My country is unlucky enough to have a big chunk of the global resources for fracked gas and oil, as we have the second largest basin in the world for fracked gas, for shale gas, and the fourth largest for oil, which I will talk about, and this is where I'm coming from. Next, please. So, the United Nations have acknowledged and have asked Argentina to leave these resources underground because to exploit this basin called Vaca Muerta, which is bigger than Denmark in size, it will consume more than 11% of the total left carbon budget for the planet. So it's completely unsustainable, it's insanity. But besides these nice words from the United Nations, which is controlled by the very countries that own the companies that are fracking Vaca Muerta. So this is once more the hypocrisy. And as you can see in the bottom picture, is from an article from the UK. This is from The Guardian, where the UK is using money that was meant for green energy and is sending it to support their fracking operation. And this is £1 billion fracking operations in Argentina. Next, please. So because of fracking, Argentina has become an exporter of LNG, and LNG is a key word for us because this is what connects the global south and us here in Europe. If Europe were to stop building these terminals to import this LNG, including Cork and Shannon and many others across Europe, they would have nowhere to send it to, and there would be no market, so they could not continue to expand fracking operations that are destroying the global south, including my homeland. Next, please. This is a picture of the main companies that are fracking in this region called Vaca Muerta. Vaca Muerta lies beneath several Argentinian provinces, and the biggest players include Total from France, which has banned fracking, Pan American Energy from British capitals, ExxonMobil, of course, and Shell from the Netherlands and also British capitals. Repsol is also a player there. Then you have Wintershall from Germany. These are all countries that cannot frack at home, and yet they are among the biggest frackers in Argentina, which are also heavily subsidized by the Argentinian government in a very corrupt and messed up situation that is actually costing us to pay for our own destruction. Next, please. So our story is, I'm a scientist, and I was not an environmental activist. I moved to Argentina I used to live in the US. I went back from working as a scientist and bought a farm to build an eco-village in a place that I thought was the safest and the best for doing this, in the province of Mendoza, the wine country, where they are really active in defending their water. They banned mega mining 12 years ago. And so I began building this eco-village, and in 2018, the new government brought fracking.
Esteban, you're muted there. Something must have happened. Hang on one sec.
Got it. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It just got cut off in 2018, fracking.
Yeah, so the government brought fracking in 2018, and ironically, this is a government that got elected because of the fight against mining 12 years earlier. Mendoza is a desert, so fighting for the water can translate into elections, as it did, but these people betrayed everyone as soon as they took office. So I got word that there was this secret study that the government was keeping secret, this environmental impact study on the first 4 pilot wells of fracking in Mendoza, which the results had been really bad, and they were showing they were already contaminating the aquifers, the water tables. So I managed to get a copy of this report through a whistleblower, because many people that are part of this government did not want anything. They were not in bed with betraying the people. This was just the leadership, but people at technical levels wanted nothing to do with this. And so the whistleblower sent me this report, and I thought, okay, it's a time we should create an environmental version of WikiLeaks. So we made these EcoLeaks pages, and in a very South American style, just leaked it without much infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure of WikiLeaks, but we thought that this must be public. So that was published March 2018, and it triggered a mass movement, unprecedented for Argentina and also for the world. Tens of thousands of people in terms of a movement against fracking. And also it triggered a war where I became a target of government attacks and persecution as they were trying to silence us. And they really were upset that I leaked this information. So I quickly became the person with most criminal cases made up against me, the most absurd things, including charges like public intimidation for warning the public about what fracking will cause, which is scientifically proving in the world, and is the basis for the prohibition of fracking in Europe. I had criminal charges for saying these things, as saying that I was responsible for causing panic in the people, which is why the people were mobilizing. And they did a number of operations against us, planted drugs in our farm, made media operations saying we were drug dealers and should be put in jail. They invaded our farm with fake documents trying to take it over. It was insanity for the whole year. Then at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, death threats began to intensify. And in March of last year, my girlfriend and I decided to come to Germany, which is where I am right now. Next, please. So this is when we were building the resistance movement. You can skip this slide. Next, please. So, and when I came to Europe, I realized that the counterpart of all the suffering and the persecution and the killing of indigenous people, the displacement, and everything that is going on in places like my country has a counterpart in Europe, opening up to expand the consumption of all of this under the guise of clean energy transition. So it's very, it made me very angry, and I wanted to do something to help and support. So I started to try to help and join the people that are fighting this LNG imports, or where it's not being done, to try to spark this fight. So we did that in Germany, where Kids from Fridays for Future were beginning a campaign to stop the building of 3 terminals in northern Germany. And then I came to Ireland to fight with many of you guys against the Shannon LNG project back then. And so here's a map of the different projects that are going on, not projects, but LNG terminals in different stages of being built, which we need to stop. It's not enough. Fracking may fall on its own because of the financial crisis and the price of oil, but we cannot cross our arms and wait for that to happen, because it might come back. Companies may go bankrupt, but the technique exists. The new companies will be formed and they are ready to go. So we must shut down and not allow these LNG terminals in Europe, and that will be the death blow that we need to deal right now, or as soon as possible, to really bury fracking underground forever or for a very long time. Next, please. So this is part of a global energy dominance by Donald Trump and the US. What we're facing is nothing less than the American domination of the world energy systems. So this is not my word. These are pictures from the website of the White House.gov, and the biggest shale lobby website in the world, which are bragging about the LNG deals they make. Next, please. So up until now, we'll see what happens, but this is such a revolution that we are looking at, that fracking has allowed the US to become a huge exporter of gas and oil. And it's because of that, the US was set to supply more than half of the global gas supply by 2035. We'll see how this is altered by this. But we need to stop this from happening. And the counterpart of this is this media brainwashing, greenwashing campaigns that we face in Europe, where they're telling you that this is a step in the right direction. Next, please. So I really want to emphasize this slide, because this is a prophetic article from the New York Times, published September 1st last year. And please keep this article in mind for what's coming, because already last year, the companies, the biggest fracking companies, are in a lot of trouble, because fracking is not even profitable. It's a financial bubble kept afloat with a lot of cheap credit and subsidies in the US and everywhere else. And in the case of the US, it's because it follows a national interest for the US to become a geopolitical superpower with controlling the energy markets through their gas. So this was never profitable, and they already began, these companies were beginning to burst already at the end of last year. Some companies went bankrupt, including Weatherford, the 4th largest service company for shale in the world. So the New York Times warned that this was the next financial crisis coming. And what I warn now is that this is going to be what triggers, as the oil is so low, this is going to be what triggers the financial meltdown and the economic depression that many people are talking about. This may be the next step in what we are seeing that will actually make the rest come along, because there's so many billions of dollars in funding that they cannot get back from these companies, especially many American banks, many of the biggest like JP Morgan, Citibank, and so on, Wells Fargo. They have put billions, now they cannot get them back. If oil doesn't come up immediately, these companies are doomed. So already last year, 91% of bankruptcies in the US were the oil and gas companies from fracking. So already they were so ready to burst, and this is going to be the final nail on the coffin. Next, please. So this is the Wall Street Journal, the biggest reference you can get. And they already, this is from the top one is from last year, and the bottom one is this year. Already one of the biggest one went bankrupt as this crisis with the coronavirus was just beginning. And now we have yet to see, after oil went negative and now it's trading in the tens, so like $10 or so. This is not sustainable. They cannot survive for very long. Next, please. So I was telling you, there is this bullshit that they're feeding us all the time, and there's two big lies in this campaign of the media that we all need to counter. And one is that this is an energy transition into a clean future. And as you can see in this news that I pasted here, like the next EU chief is backing gas as part of a climate transition. The other one is in Spanish. It's like Spain selling itself as an energy leader, of transition leader for going into LNG. So this is what is going on all over Europe, and that we need to make a great communicational effort to counter that. Next, please. So independence from Russia is the other big lie, because Russia, okay, they're saying because buy the American LNG so you don't depend on the Russian pipeline gas. But Russia also has LNG. It has a two-pronged strategy. So it's playing both sides. It's false to say that this Cold War era type of fear mongering has to do with Trump's strategy to make the European public afraid of Russia and feel that they need to diversify from that. But it's also a lie. Next slide, please. Could maybe we skip? Can you go back? Sorry, there was one. I don't know where it is. Well, anyways, I will talk about more about this. No, next. So we have been. I think we're missing a slide, but maybe we passed it before. So in Europe, we have been doing many actions during the past year, and Germany was one place where we organized some demos against the building of these terminals, bringing together. We need to come together, all the movements, no exclusion, as inclusive as possible, because this is the only way that we can stop this. Next, please. In Sweden, we blocked the port of Gothenburg for the whole day to stop the permit that was going to be given to an LNG terminal that was being built. And this was the first success. The Swedish government later denied the permit for this terminal to go on and import this gas. So we need to replicate this experience, and civil disobedience works. This is the most important thing. Legal steps are important, and sending letters and whatever, but there's nothing as powerful as people mobilized by the thousands or the hundreds, and like blocking a port like this. Next, please. Then with you guys in Ireland, this is to say, I posted these two very different worlds, because one is the action we did with Extinction Rebellion, and I think there were people from Fridays for Future and local groups too, in Dublin, wallpapering the Ministry of Environment. And also we got the support of the Pope, who I met soon after that. And the Pope has been supportive of our fight in Mendoza, where his support is very important because it's a very Catholic community. And I was told that you guys, you know, the experience in Northern Ireland too. Yeah, in Northern Ireland, maybe also the number of Catholics is higher as well. And, you know, having the support of the Pope is a big blow for many conservative politicians that are pushing all of these fossil fuel infrastructure. So it's a really disruptive element that we, even for, I know many activists may not like the Pope because of ideological or whatever, or many other reasons that may abound. But this goes to say that we need to use all tools available, all channels that we can, because otherwise we're not going to win this fight for survival. Next, please. And then the last action we did so far with you guys in Ireland, and we organized a big international action. This was February 21st, very recently. And so we connected the global south at the places of extraction of this fracked gas in Argentina and in Texas with their counterpart of the place where it's being consumed and imported. In the case of Spain, the first ever export of Argentina's fracked gas was made to Barcelona a few weeks before our action. That's why we organized this action there. And in the case of Ireland, you guys, you connected with the USA. So on the same day, the 4 places mobilized simultaneously so that we can connect the dots from production with consumption. And in a way, this is also for us to give visibility to these very invisible fights of the global south that otherwise risk persecution, incarceration. It could be as bad as torture and death and disappearance. But if we can give them visibility by mobilizing with them and going, in this case, to the embassies. They did in Ireland, you guys went to the embassy of the US, also to the Argentinian embassy in solidarity. In Spain, we went to the Argentinian consulate. And in Mendoza, they went to the consulate of Spain, and they were received by the consul. So this gives them, it legitimizes the struggle, it gives it visibility, it makes it much harder for the governor to kill or disappear or put in jail any of those people. And I think this is a template that we can use besides whatever happens with fracking, but there's so many other environmental fights and social struggles of the global south that are deeply connected, directly connected with European, northern, the global north companies that are doing these damages, that we have a opportunity and a responsibility to do things from Europe to support them. I think that's all.
Esteban, do you want me to go back and find it?
No,
I think I may have skipped
no,
a
it was
slide.
it was not important. I will
Okay.
just say what it was. The slide was Rick Perry, the Ministry of Energy back then for the US, and he went as far as to say that they were liberating Europe. They're calling this frack gas freedom gas, and he went as far as to say to the media that 70 years ago the US liberated Europe from Nazi occupation with their army, and now they are once again bringing liberty, freedom to Europe in the form of freedom gas. This is how much they are, how cynical they can be on our very faces, and we must not allow.
Okay, thank you so much, Esteban. That was really great, and thank you for making so clear the links between the fracking that's happening in Argentina and other places and the importation into Europe and our consumption here. So a lot of the questions that come through to the Q&A we've been able to answer live or answer written, and I think all your presentations were so comprehensive as well. There haven't been as many questions as I expected. So I'm aware we're on time, so I just want to ask, would anybody like to give some closing comments, some brief closing comments, Aideen or Fidelma maybe? You don't have to. Okay. Esteban, would you like to say anything to finish?
Well, that we must unite and that we must plan for what's coming after this crisis. There's a lot of uncertainty and people don't know what to do, where to go, what is really coming our way. But what we know for sure is that the climate fight is not going anywhere. It's going to get more difficult over time, as we can expect reactionary movements to emerge after the economic collapse of the world and the depression and the desperation that may be coming our way. So we might see many Donald Trumps popping up around the world, including in Europe. And the environmental campaigners and activists must be prepared to be used as scapegoats for the depression. They will say that we are against progress, that we are stopping economic growth. They will put the people against the people and try to create civil war, between these two. They will try to polarize the world. And so at the same time, I think the coronavirus crisis is a great tool. Nothing will be the same after this. And it gives us great elements for us to use to really take the fight for the planet to a whole new level, and really bring politicians, make them accountable, and really show what a crisis, how a crisis can be handled, how an emergency is handled, how to respond, and no more bullshit and greenwashing allowed. So I think everything will be, both the good and the bad will go up in intensity in the times to come. And beyond anything else, I think uniting across movements, ideologies, and especially geography. The Global South must unite with the Global North to solve both the exploitation of the Global South and the death of us all as a planet. So that's all. Thank you very much for organizing this.
Thank you so much for your participation, and thank you to Fidelma and Aideen for your presentations, and to Trina and Brian for helping with tech support, and to all of you for joining us and for participating as well through the chat and the Q&A. I am going to wrap this up now because we're a little bit over time. So just to say that this has been recorded, so we're going to upload it to YouTube and our social media channels, but I think I'm also going to put together just a small package of materials, the video, the slides, some links to the different social media channels of the groups that were represented here tonight, and send them on to everybody who registered for the webinar. Okay, we're going to sign off. Thank you all so much.